Welcome back to episode 2 of making a fan expansion for the Austin Powers collectible card game. We're making a whole full expansion set of gold member cards for this game. But before I get too into that, I want to talk about the existing cards from the base set. I want to talk about the archetypes and kinds of decks you would make with those cards, and then we're going to be making new cards to fit into those archetypes to help kind of support the older cards before we get too crazy with it with all the new cards. Got it? Cool. All right, here we are. We're talking about, God, that's so bright. The rulebook actually recommends all 4 of these decks, and looking through all the cards myself, these are kind of the only decks you can really make. There's really like 3 or 4 main archetypes that any trading card game deck falls under, so we're going to slot all 4 of these into those kinds of archetypes. The Austin deck is, I would call a control deck. You're getting rid of cards that your opponent played, making them discard cards from their hand, countering things they're doing while you're playing bigger and better things on your side of the board. It's really annoying to play against, and it's really fun to be annoying with control decks. Dr. Evil, out of the 4 main card game archetypes, I'd call it a combo deck. So you have cards like Scott Evil, you also have the Frau Farbissina card that lets you put a discarded Scott Evil back in your hand. Then there's Half Nelson, which is a swinger card that lets you draw cards when you try and assassinate someone with a mini-me. So we're doing some light combo stuff with the Dr. Evil deck, I'd say. And then we got Felicity Shagwell. This is an aggro deck. It's aggressive. It wants to play a bunch of stuff really quickly to overwhelm your opponent. A lot of the Felicity cards can be played for free if you have specific other cards. You can have a really explosive turn 1 where you just play a Felicity, play like 4 Shagettes, try and assassinate someone. And then you got Henchmen. These are your, fat bastards, your, the guy with the bazooka, I think his name is Joe or something. The rulebook says that they're their own deck, but I couldn't really find a, thing that all the henchmen are trying to do. So in the trading card game world, when a deck is kind of trying to do a little bit of everything and isn't really doing one thing particularly well, what do we call a deck like that? That's right, mid-range. We call that a mid-range deck. If you ever hear this term, it just means I don't really know what my deck is doing. So I've made a couple cards for each of these decks that'll kind of add a little bit to them. Felicity, not so much, because Felicity Shagwell is not in Austin Powers in Goldmember. They get a new female lead in Goldmember, played by Beyonce Knowles, so Foxy Cleopatra is going to have her own deck in a later episode. We'll talk about that. So I made a couple swinger cards for the Felicity deck. We have the Pimp Mobile that Austin drives that gives you extra actions. She's already doing a bunch of stuff for free on her turn. Why not give her some more actions to do too? So just a couple things to help out the Felicity deck. So we got the Austin Powers Pimped Out card. It lets you replay a scored happening card, so you can kind of get double value out of something. Then we have number 3. So this is a card that you would get to play on your opponent's side of the field, and it gives them negative stats. So again, great for control. If one opponent is kind of getting too big, getting too many agents, you could play number 3 on their side to kind of slow them down a little bit, control them a little bit. So henchmen, like I said, they're not really doing any one thing in particular. So I'm going to try and change that a little bit. So I've added a lot of cards to the henchman deck that are doing new stuff. So I won't really get too in-depth with them because I'm going to talk about all the new mechanics I'm adding to the game later. But here's a couple gold members. I made a new Fat Bastard that if your opponent wants to target it, they have to discard a card. We have Dr. Evil Jailbird. If he's ever discarded, you actually get to score him instead of putting him in your discard pile. So maybe trying to cook up a little combo where you're discarding your own cards, but then scoring him, things like that. We also got a mini-me that lets you, when you play him, just score an active Dr. Evil you have on your side of the board. Just some interesting combo stuff happening here that I wanted to elevate. And then we have a bunch of new frickin' bone cards. I'm not going to talk about these because they don't have abilities in the base game. The ones that I made also don't have abilities. But maybe they will in the future. Again, you're going to have to watch the next couple episodes to find out. So that's it for this episode. Next episode, we're going to be talking about new archetypes that I'm going to be introducing to the game. So I'm pretty excited for it. And who knows, maybe you're excited too. I don't know. I don't know if this is exciting at all for anyone but me.